One of the big surprises of history is that Christianity grew so rapidly in the Roman Empire. It grew rapidly despite the fact that it was persecuted. It grew rapidly despite the fact that many people saw it as a bizarre, dangerous movement. We've spoken in previous discussions about how many people would think about the cross, for example, a symbol that the Christians embraced. Despite the persecution, despite the sense that many people in the Roman world had that there was something bizarre, really weird, potentially dangerous about Christianity, the movement continued to grow. You see there where Jerusalem is in the bottom left, there in Western Asia, westernmost Asia. And then we see where Rome is in Italy. And what's interesting is that within one generation of Jesus' life, Christianity had already spread from present-day Israel to the center of Rome itself. And we know this for a few reasons. One, Nero himself blamed the fire in Rome on the Christians. There was a big fire in Rome in 64 AD. Some people blamed Nero. People said, well, Nero set the fire because he wanted to rebuild the city of Rome for his own glory. Nero blamed the Christians. And why would he blame the Christians? Well, because, first of all, this means we must have Christians in Rome. Secondly, he knows a lot of people have a negative view of the Christians already. And so it would be, if you're going to cast blame on somebody, then this would be an easy group to target. So that's one reason we know that Christians were there, because Nero blames the fire in Rome on the Christians, and this is what the Roman historian Tacitus tells us. Also, the Roman historian Suetonius tells us this. And then in an early Christian document, Paul's letter to the Philippians, Paul refers to the Christians who are in Caesar's household. So the idea is that even among the staff, and sort of we can think of as the White House, people working in the White House, where the American president obviously resides and works, sort of that idea that there are Christians who even were among the staff within Caesar's household. So it's pretty remarkable within one generation, this movement, despite the negative views that Nero taps into, this movement has grown from present-day Israel to the heart of Rome itself. What are some of the reasons that Christianity spread so quickly in the Roman Empire despite the persecution and despite the other things we've mentioned? One of the things to say is that Christianity spread quickly because it could. There's a practical reason. And the Romans, as we've said in previous discussions, they had elaborate shipping lanes. They built many roads. That phrase, all roads lead to Rome. And so to hold the empire together, you've got shipping lanes, you've got predictable shipping lanes, you've got roads that have been built. And of course, you use these shipping lanes, you use these roads to transport goods, to transport troops, to travel, and also to spread the Christian message. And so one reason Christianity spread so rapidly is that it was possible because of the infrastructure that the Romans built, the ports, the shipping, the roads, etc. And the Christians take advantage of that. So there's a very practical reason why this happens. Now that by itself, of course, does not explain much, because there are a lot of other religious groups, okay? And Christianity is the one that grew rapidly. So this by itself doesn't explain a lot, but it's part of the story. Something else is that Christianity was a religion that was easy to get into. You have to confess, and then to be within the community, then you are baptized. So you confess your faith in Jesus Christ as Lord, and you are baptized. And there on the left we have an image of, I think, Jesus being baptized. So you confess the central beliefs of the Christian faith, and you are baptized, and you're in. It doesn't cost you any money. You don't have to pass any sort of skills test, something like that. Now, there are a lot of different religions in Rome that have different entry requirements, but one religion around the same time was the religion of Mithra. And this was a religion for men, for military men primarily, and to get into it involved the sacrifice of a bull, which is very expensive. So that's going to be prohibitively expensive for a lot of people. Christianity is free. You get in for free. To use the language of early Christian documents, it is by grace that people are saved. It is by grace that people become Christians. Grace, coming from the Latin word gratia, meaning, sort of a gift. It's something that's bestowed on you. So Christianity is a movement that's easy to get into. It doesn't cost you any money. You don't have to have particular skills. You confess, you're baptized, you're in. Something else that Christians had to their advantage was a clear sense of identity. Now this is important because as the years go on from the 1st, 2nd, 3rd into the 4th century, into the beginning of the 5th century, the Roman Empire is in a state of gradual unraveling. This is especially true after the reign of Marcus Aurelius. We've discussed before that Marcus Aurelius confronts many significant problems. Plague, flooding, massive flooding, invasions on the borders, etc. And after Marcus Aurelius, so Marcus Aurelius is the last emperor who's linked to this idea of the Pax Romana. After Marcus Aurelius, then I think we definitely see a gradual unraveling of the Roman Empire. And as the Roman Empire unravels, people lose confidence in the empire. They lose confidence in the leadership of their empire. They lose confidence in the system. And so if you have a movement within the empire that has a very clear sense of mission, a very clear sense of identity, then that's going to be attractive to a lot of people. And Christians had a clear sense of identity, so this comes to us from the letter to Diognetus, written in the 2nd century, right? Somewhere between the year 20 and 200 AD. We won't read the whole thing here, but what this describes is the basic outlook of the Christians. That, for example, the Christians, they dwell in their own countries, but simply as sojourners, that is, as visitors. As citizens, they share in all things with others, and yet they endure all things as if foreigners. Every foreign land is to them as their native country, and every land of their birth as a land of strangers. They pass their days on earth, but they are citizens of heaven. So this is basically repeating the same idea in different ways. Christians have a strong sense of identity as citizens of a different empire. The Roman Empire is unraveling. People are losing confidence in the Roman Empire. They're losing confidence in the leadership of the Roman Empire. Well, here's a group that has a strong sense of identity. They are citizens of a different empire, the empire of God, the kingdom of God. And as you look around and it seems that people are losing confidence in the Roman Empire, you yourself, you're losing confidence in the Roman Empire, but then you see these people who have a strong sense of identity, a strong sense of commitment to a different empire. Well, maybe that sense of confidence, that sense of clear identity is going to attract people to your movement. This letter here it goes on much longer than this. This is just a small excerpt from it, but it's a very interesting statement from early Christians that tells us a lot. Something else that's attractive about the Christians is that this religion is inclusive. Everyone is welcome. There are other religions in the Roman Empire that are exclusive. So religions, for this, a religion for this particular group, a religion for that particular group, etc. The Christians are inclusive. Everybody's welcome. Here's a really kind of an amazing sentence from an early Christian document, the letter to a church in Galatia, a place called Galatia. And it says, "You are all sons of God through faith in Jesus Christ." Of course, we could say sons and daughters. You are all children of God through faith in Jesus Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ. Now, of course, this isn't literal. If a person is a slave in Roman society, then that's not to say that the person automatically, is no longer a slave if the person becomes a Christian. Obviously, males remain males, females remain females. This is not, a literal statement, obviously. What it is saying is that within the Christian community, everyone is equal. Everyone is one. And so master and slave in Roman society, they have a set relationship. But within the Christian community, they are equal. This is an inclusive movement. And of course, slaves, for example, are going to be attracted to this movement, especially if within the movement they can make contributions. They can exercise some of their gifts. Suppose you have a slave who, has natural teaching gifts, for example, but as a slave, he or she is not really able to exercise that gift. But within the Christian community, perhaps the slave can exercise that gift. This openness to everyone is going to attract, it's going to be attractive to some people. So Christianity was quite inclusive. We see this here, this really interesting early Christian document, the letter to Philemon, where Paul is writing to Philemon, who's a slave owner of the slave Onesimus. And Paul refers to Onesimus, who is a slave, as his son. And Paul says to Philemon, formerly he, that is Onesimus, was useful to you, but now he has become useful both to you and me. And Paul says in this letter, or Paul refers to Onesimus in this letter as a dear brother, right? In fact, you see that down below. So, I'll send him back to you no longer as a slave, but better than a slave, as a dear brother. Well, there's that language. And here's Paul, this person of tremendous status, who is embracing a slave as a dear brother. Well, there's an illustration of sort of the inclusivity of early Christianity. And so a lot of folks who otherwise might be on the margins of society, they might be attracted to this movement. Another thing is that Christianity was a movement of high moral standards, and being a Christian, of course, could come with a great cost. We've talked many times about persecution in the Roman Empire. At different times, at different places, to different levels of intensity, there was persecution. And so being a Christian in the Roman Empire didn't guarantee you'd be persecuted, but there was a chance of it. And there was a chance not only that you'd be persecuted, but perhaps face torture, some sort of horrendous death. And then there are very high moral standards within the Christian community. You read early Christian writings, and early Christian writings are full of teaching about the moral standards, the high moral standards of the community. Now, initially, people might think, well, why would people be attracted to this? To a movement that has very high moral standards and that holds people accountable to those standards, and also involves risk, that is the personal risk of persecution. And I would just point you back to what we were saying earlier. In a world where people feel like the Roman Empire is unraveling, like the meaning that goes along with the Roman Empire, that's unraveling. We're looking for something concrete in this world. We're looking for something to hold on to. We're looking for something that's meaningful. We're looking for something that's worth believing in. We're losing confidence that the Roman Empire is worth believing in, but we want to believe in something. Well, here's a movement that has high standards. Here's a movement that, might cost me something significant. Well, why would I be willing, or why would people be willing to face significant costs for something unless it really was meaningful? So what I'm talking about here really is a sort of a psychological thing. That in a world where people are looking for something to believe in, they're looking for something to grab onto, Christianity provides something. Here's something that's so meaningful, people are willing to die for it. People are willing to suffer for it. And people will live according to high moral standards to be a part of this community. I think that's going to attract people. Obviously, it's not going to attract everybody, but it's going to attract some people. It helps to explain why the movement grew. Related to that is early Christianity is a movement characterized by motivation, commitment, and confidence. We mentioned a minute ago this letter to Philemon, this slaveholder, slaveholder. His slave was Onesimus. Paul refers to Onesimus as a dear brother, right? So what's interesting is at the very beginning of this letter, Paul refers to himself as a prisoner, and he will be executed during the reign of Nero, during one of the anti-Christian persecutions And so at the very beginning of the letter, Paul refers to himself as a prisoner. And yet at the end of the letter, we see Paul's hopefulness, because he's hoping that he'll get out of prison, and he's hoping that he'll be able to continue his work. He's hoping he'll be able to carry on with his work. And so he tells Philemon, prepare a guest room for me. I hope to be restored to you. Now, Paul has a sense, I think, that his time is probably winding down. But he has a sense of hope, motivation. When he's in prison, he's not going to let himself be down about it. He's going to keep working, right? He's going to keep doing what he can do. It's a movement characterized by motivation, commitment, and confidence. There's this passage from another early Christian document, the second letter to Timothy. And listen to this, how confident this language is, where the writer says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. There's that sense of perseverance. And now here comes a statement of hope. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award me on that day. And not only to me, but to others who are part of this movement, to others who are on this path with me. So again, in a world where it feels like the Roman Empire is unraveling, we're losing confidence in our leaders, we're losing confidence in the Roman Empire, people are looking for something concrete to latch onto. And I think this movement, which is characterized by motivation, commitment, confidence, perseverance, this is going to attract people to it. Something else we see in early Christian writing is the absolute importance of women in this movement. And I think early Christianity is going to attract a lot of women to it. Now, of course, when we think of early Christianity, the beginnings of Christianity, we think, of course, of key men, Jesus of Nazareth, obviously, Peter and Paul. But as we read early Christian documents and we pay attention to the details, then we see that women are very, very involved in this movement. And it might be something similar with slaves. There are going to be a lot of differences between women who aren't slaves and slaves. But one thing that might be similar is that in Roman society, a lot of women are going to be limited in what they can do in society. But within the church, remember that passage from the letter to the church at Galatia, where it says, well, within the Christian community, in Christ, there's neither male nor female, right? Obviously, that's not taken literally. Of course, males remain males, females remain females. The point is that within the church, there's equality, right? Within the church, there's unity. And I think we see this in early Christian writing. We also see it in early Christian art, right? Art, that's the word we use. I don't think the intention here is to create art. The intention here is to remind most Christians who cannot read, remind them of stories in the early Christian writings, the Gospels. And so here we have on the left, we have a reminder of this very important story of the woman who exercised great faith. She had gone to doctors looking for healing for many years. And she thought, well, if I could just touch the hem of Jesus's garment, then maybe I'll be healed. And she's an example of faith. Notice that what we're looking at here is a story about the importance of exercising faith. And the key figure, of course, is Jesus. But who's the other key figure in this story? It's a woman. We look at the beginning of the Gospels, the beginning of the Gospel of Luke, the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew. And a key person, very much involved, a central figure in making all of this possible is Mary, right? So right at the beginning, we have Mary playing an absolutely key role. Throughout the Gospels, we get to the end of the Gospels, the first people to find the empty tomb are women. And then we see this work itself out through the early Christian writings. And then here's just a depiction of a Christian meal, Christian gathering, perhaps celebration of Eucharist or communion. Notice that we have, really, it looks like a family at the table, young children, men, women there. They're all together. Now what's interesting is that non-Christians recognized that this movement was a movement that attracted women, and that gave women opportunities to do things. So, for example, there's this writer, Celsus, a very anti-Christian person in the 2nd century, who wrote that Christianity was embraced by foolish, dishonorable, and stupid people, only slaves, women, and little children, right? So this is a put down, right? Well, the reason we don't take Christianity seriously is because it's attracting foolish, dishonorable, and stupid people. It's attracting slaves, it's attracting women, it's attracting little children. Of course, the women are going to be of course the little children are going to be attached to the women, right? So if women are being attracted to this movement, that also means their children are going to come into the movement. And so Celsus recognizes that women are coming into this movement. Pliny, I love this passage from this letter that Pliny, the governor of Turkey in the 2nd century, writes to the Emperor Trajan, and he's trying to figure out what to do with the Christians, and he speaks of examining some Christians, talking with them to find out what's going on within their movement. In this case, he's not just talking, he's inflicting torture. He says, "These examinations made me think it necessary to inquire by torments," that is torture, "what the truth was, which I did of 2 maids who were called deaconesses." So this is something that I really, one of these documents that I really love, because it tells us so much in so few words. That here we have 2 servant maids. Another word could be slaves. So, however you look at it, these 2 young women they have very, very humble positions in Roman society. They're servant maids, they're slaves, one of those 2. But either way, very low status in Roman society. But within the Christian community, they are deaconesses. In other words, they have some leadership roles, they have some influence. So very interesting. Celsus and Pliny, they confirm what we can see in early Christian writings, that women are playing very important roles. And as these women come into the movement, of course, they bring their children with them. And I think that helps to explain the growth of the movement. There are a lot of passages you can look at. For example, here we have a reference to 4 daughters who are prophesying. Here we have a reference to women who labored with me in the gospel, right? And then we have the names up there. And in this case, it looks like these 2 might not be getting along, right? And the writer of the letter to the Philippians says, hey, let's help these 2 women to get along because they have labored with me in the gospel. So there's that important thing, that we have this evidence that these women played an important role. Here at the beginning of the 16th chapter of Romans, Paul is writing. He mentions a bunch of people you see there in the orange or the yellow, that he's mentioning women: Phoebe, Prisca, Mary, Junia, right? These are important people. Actually, the very first person Paul mentions as he begins to sign off is Phoebe, right? Very interesting. In verse 3, Paul refers to a couple, Prisca and Aquila. He mentions the woman first, which is very unusual. Very unusual. He mentions her first. We have Mary, we have Junia. Here we come back to sort of this history of earliest Christianity, the book of Acts. A woman called Lydia who prevailed upon us, right? So here's a woman who is exercising some influence over leaders within the church, right? And she says, the Lord opened her heart to pay attention to what was said by Paul. And after she was baptized, and her household as well. There it is again, notice that, and her household. Here's a woman who joins the movement and brings her household with her. So women coming into the movement is very important when we talk about the growth of Christianity, because they're going to bring their kids, they're going to bring their household with them. And she urged us, saying, "If you have judged me faithful to the Lord, come to my house and stay." And she prevailed upon us. So notice that influence that this woman Lydia is having. I love this one. This is really interesting. A number of women are mentioned. We have Mary, we have Joanna, and Susanna, and many others. And then notice the last line there, who provided for them out of their means. In other words, who provided for Jesus and the disciples out of their means. In other words, the work of Jesus and the disciples, some of that work is getting done because these women are making it possible. These women are making it possible by providing for them out of their means. I don't know exactly what that's getting at, But it is saying that the work of Jesus, the work of the disciples around Jesus, this is getting done because these women are making it possible by providing for the disciples and Jesus out of their means. There are a lot of other passages. I'll just put those there if you want to pause and look these up. But suppose an early 4th century woman with ambition to be a leader or person of influence read the Christian Gospels. What might she notice in the following passages? And I think what she'll notice is that women are very, very involved. So historically, this is important. If we ask the historical question, why did Christianity grow so rapidly? I think it's a movement that's attracting women who in society in general may not have a lot of opportunities. Within the Christian community, they will have opportunities. They bring their children with them. That helps to explain the growth. Well, so we have a movement that has grown very rapidly, and then by the time we get to the early 4th century, the year 312, Christianity has grown very rapidly, but it's not yet the religion that the Roman Empire itself becomes identified with. And this is one of the weirdest things ever to happen in history that I can think of, that the religion that is persecuted, the religion persecuted during the time of Marcus Aurelius, the religion persecuted during the time of Nero, the religion persecuted during the time of Diocletian, now this religion actually becomes identified with the Roman Empire itself. This is one of the weirdest, most surprising transitions in history. And it really is a turning point in history, there's no question about it. Well, just to touch on the basics, Rome is in a state of civil war, so we talked about, Rome is gradually unraveling. If your country, if your empire is in a state of civil war, that's a sign that you've got significant problems. The Emperor Constantine, he's in charge of the western part of the empire, you've got the eastern part of the empire, and you've got civil war. Well, before a major battle in the year 312, according to the story, Constantine hears this phrase in Latin, in hoc signo vinces, by this sign you shall conquer. And the sign that he sees is the Chi Rho, what looks to us like an XP. You see the images on the right there. This is a very common early Christian symbol. What looks to us like an X with a P in the middle of it, these are the first 2 letters in Greek for the name Christ, so Christos. So the K sound is made by what looks to us like an X, the R sound is made by what looks to us like a P. So that Chi Rho, those are the first 2 letters in the Greek spelling of Christ. And the story is, we won't read it here, but I've given you this from a Roman historian. The story is that Constantine hears this voice, in hoc signo vinces, by this sign you shall conquer, and the sign that he sees is the Chi Rho. This is just one of the least expected turning points in history, because all of a sudden this faith, which was persecuted, is now associated with the power of the Roman state. That leads to complications, right? When you're the outsider religion, that means something. But what happens when Christianity becomes the insider religion? There's no question that things get complicated. But let's just finish up looking at some images. There's the Chi Rho. Also, on either side, you have the, doesn't look like an A, but the Alpha and the Omega. Alpha being the first letter in the Greek alphabet, what looks to us like a W. The Omega being the last letter in the Greek alphabet. The Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Another early symbol that another symbol that the early Christians used. Here we have it again. You've got the Chi Rho. You've got what looks like a W on the left. We've got an A on the right. That W is in an Omega, it's called. And so you have the Chi Rho. You have the Alpha and the Omega, 2 symbols that the early Christians used. There it is again, the Chi Rho. This is a tomb marker. Down at the bottom it says cum pace, so this person is resting cum pace, literally with peace, in peace. You see the Chi Rho, and also now that I'm looking at it, I see the Alpha and the Omega as well. There we have the Alpha, and I'm assuming that's an Omega on the other side. It looks like a cup. Chi Rho in the middle, dove down below with the olive branch, another early Christian symbol. And here's a great one, early Christian symbol. There you have a person, I'm not sure who that is, perhaps that's Jesus. Hands extended, that's the posture of prayer, another very early Christian symbol. There's the Chi-Rho. There's the dove with the olive branch. So very interesting that this movement that started out in such humble circumstances in present-day Israel became as influential a faith as it was in the Roman world. Then it becomes associated with the Roman Empire itself, and now, of course, it is a faith with global, just massive influence all around the globe. And for example, if you look at China there, of course, there's a very small Christian population in China, but Christians are there as well. In Korea, throughout the world. So this is an interesting story, how this movement began in present-day Israel in such humble circumstances, and then came to have such dominance in terms of its influence on people's lives all around the world to the present day.